Talking about being young, lack of experience, mentorship. How has that impacted you?
I'll talk about two mentors. They're both my bosses. So I took two jobs before I did the startup. The first one, John, every day for 4 years at 1:30 in the afternoon, John and I would talk for a half hour. He was the head of this global sales team. He devoted a hell of a lot of time to me. That mentorship taught me a couple of things. Number one, always give somebody benefit of the doubt. Number two, never give up on somebody. Number three, dedication over time, like it breeds this compounding interest. And I went from somebody who was like almost a stereotypical screw up at a sales company to becoming like the top performer in my cohort within like a year or two.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Yem Podcast, episode 7. And today I'm here with Adam Connor. First off, Adam, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be here and be on the podcast. Super excited for this episode. So yeah, why don't you just
It's my pleasure.
Why don't you just kick us off, introduce yourself, your business, and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay. So my name's Adam. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hi. Oh, you can't see me over there. I have lived in the Pittsburgh area for like 2.5 years. I moved here in January of 22. And before I came, I had this little business, which I'm still operating today, which is called Authentic Avenue. Authentic Avenue is a fancy word and what I describe for the best way to build high stakes relationships through content. I say it's the most authentic avenue to do so. So the business just creates flagship content series for B2B brands, which helps them to convert their high stakes prospects. That's it. It's just podcasting as a prism to reflect thought leadership outward. And if they can build relationships along the way, like that's where the dollars are, at least in B2B. So I was doing that, started in 2020 because I was basically doing this thing for a startup between 2018 and 2020. And then that startup fell apart. And so I was like, well, the product fit wasn't great, but this tactic killed. Like we got more leads than we knew what to do with.
That's awesome.
I'm not quite done with the discipline. Let me see how far I can spread it. That's what I'm doing here.
Nice. So what was that for? So that was in 2018, you said?
Yeah, in 2018 is when I started doing podcasts with business people. I started doing podcasts and like just on audio, folks. Like this is way more robust than I'm normally used to doing video. I mean, I've gotten there, but it's slow to form. 2016, late 2016 is when I started doing podcasts just on audio. I was doing tech sales. I was traveling all over the place. Nice. I really wanted to do YouTube, but I was traveling so much that I couldn't take a camera and have a set with me. I wasn't that nimble and I just wasn't skilled and I didn't want to put in the time, but I thought, oh, just a microphone anywhere I go? That can't be too hard, right? It's harder than I thought. And then in 2018, I thought, okay, well, I have this skill. I was no longer doing sales, but this startup needed a way to get in the room with these chief executives they wanted to sell to because they had investors and these investors wanted them to prove product market fit. And I said, well, I don't know too much about this, but why don't I just combine what I was doing with what you need? And they said, okay, we'll try that. And for the 2 years that I worked with that startup, it worked like crazy. 2020 is when then the product market fit didn't pan out, but we got in the room with so many chief marketing officers. I think it was kind of good because we were using content. Marketing officers, like our incentives were aligned to be a part of it. And so 4 years ago when that business fell apart, almost to the day, I think September the 9th of 2020 is when I formally launched Authentic Avenue, hard launched it, as they say now.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Basically your anniversary.
Yeah, I've gotten my 4-year degree, pretty much.
That's awesome.
And I've learned a lot. And there's a lot I could write on that diploma.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little bit.
Sure.
So how did you even get into this, like with the podcasting and even like your start in 2018?
Yeah.
Maybe go back a little bit to bring us to that.
I'm an attention whore, really. I mean, it's what it is. I started with like presentation and acting and all this like way before that.
Gotcha.
So my first taste of presenting anything was I was 11 years old. I entered into a public speaking competition that was started as a classroom assignment that I just had to make a 4 to 5 minute speech, present to the class. If you do well, then you present in front of the school. And then if you win the competition, you go on and on, you present in front of increasingly bigger folks until I won the Maryland/South Delaware competition. And I got a couple of bucks to college, which was awesome as an 11-year-old and solidified in my head.
As an 11-year-old?
Yeah, as an 11-year-old. Awesome. Yeah, they gave me like a college savings bond.
Nice,
it was sweet.
awesome.
I was like, yeah, let's knock that out. Let's get that tuition out of it. Turns out college doesn't cost $1,500. Crazy. Unfortunately. That'd be great. But then I was like, okay, so I knew that I had the talent. That was obvious. But then the podcasting thing, so in late 2016, I graduated 2014. I've been doing tech sales for 2 years, and I just could not stop itching to get back out and present in a way. Like I had done theater through all that time. I'd done a little bit of film acting at school. And the speech making was still in the background. And I wasn't doing any of that selling over the phone and like web conference calls. And I thought, I have more talent than that. And I want to just see if it would work. So late 2016, early 2017, I started my first show. It was called To Dare as Human. It was to talk to entrepreneurs. The phrase "to err as human" being the old quote, and I just tweaked it to say, well, it's a conscious decision to dive into entrepreneurial world to make a dare. So then 2 years after that, when I left the sales job altogether, I just landed at this startup, and I was like, you know what? I bet I can make money from this. And so I wasn't doing a sales job anymore. I was doing like customer success, which I was kind of new at, but it was just basically maintaining relationships.
Yeah.
Well, there's much more to it than that, but that's what it was to me.
Yeah.
So to make the very long story short, I then proposed to the leadership of that startup to use this medium to get in the room with not the entrepreneurs and founders I'd interviewed at first, but like the people that were going to buy the stuff that they wanted to sell.
Yeah.
And they said, all right, let's try it. And so that's really how it started. But in the back of my head, it was like years and years of acting and half drag shows and getting kissed by actors and all this. Like Kiefer Sutherland kissed me right on the mouth like in 2013. That's a highlight. That's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, all that stuff like then dilutes into, all right, well, I can't do that every day. Maybe I could do it with business people though, and provide some value, get my foot in the door.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You just said provide them value.
Yeah.
So value is a very big thing for me, and kind of how our business, Shoot Media, positions itself. And a word that I feel like social media is just people gathering. So I feel like people have lost the art of value because they're so focused on receiving something rather than giving. So maybe dive into what value means to you.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that briefly. There are two like lenses that I tried to use at the same time, and I end up getting my vision on the world out of focus. One is I love receiving the attention. That's the very like bombastic headline I started that last like monologue with, is I'm pretty much an attention whore. Like I love watching the love spill over, right? I post something online people like, it's reflected. It's an instant dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Now, for the same reason, I look at the world with another lens, which is if I'm not receiving that, then I feel that I don't like deserve the praise. So this medium, especially in the business world, became particularly elegant for me because I was like, let's take the startup, for instance. I was working at a startup. We were like 10 people. Nobody knew who we were, and they shouldn't have. But I could say, instead of, hey, let me show you this demo of this platform, walk you through whatever, I could say, hi, I'm starting a podcast. We're talking specifically to these types of folks, specifically to this type of audience about this very tight set of topics that I know you're an expert on. Come talk about how good you are at your job.
Yeah.
The lens gets flipped. The person that gets asked says, I get to talk about how good I am at my job for 30 minutes? Great. And by the way, those people often have a PR team behind them that are like being paid to and incentivized to get them placed on media. Like all this stuff aligned. Like I said, the incentives are aligned. So they said, great. So the deliverance of value in my mind is basically whatever you can give the person that they don't have today. And by the way, I don't necessarily think that's knowledge. I don't necessarily think that's insight. I think you could ChatGPT the hell out of a lot of things. You can Google search a lot of things. The one thing that is intangible but infinitely capturable via this great medium is attention. Yeah. And so I equate value today with attention. It's why I use this medium to get in touch with founders and heads of businesses and all that. But the root of it was me desperately craving that attention.
Yeah.
So I decided to just sort of create it instead.
That's awesome. So you're a master at getting attention, which
hold
on the road to mastery.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because
I'm very much an apprentice.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's kind of a trick question because then people are gonna watch it, and if you say right off the bat, you're like, this guy.
Because
on
I'm
the road to mastery.
Exactly. Because I'm not a giant content creator.
Yeah.
Any of y'all watching this right now, go to any of my social pages, and you'll see like maybe a couple thousand followers. Okay, that's good. But like it's whatever. Most people have that, and frankly, 1,000 of them could have been people that I worked with. Right? Yeah. If I got close to mastery in anything, it would just be using content to break down traditional barriers to business access. That is really it. I have only on one occasion created any piece of content that got over 1 million views. My content has never been targeted towards an audience where it even could garner that type of attention.
Exactly.
So maybe very specific surgical, tactical attention.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot about.
Yeah.
Not a master.
Yeah.
Not yet.
On the road.
I'm on the road. I'm on the road to Viridian City. Yeah.
Do you listen to Gary Vee a lot?
He was, of course, the inspiration, I think, for me and a lot of people on giving value until, you have something to offer. Hormozi says a lot of the same thing. He does his adaptation of that. So I certainly used to. He's now one in a mix of people that I pay attention to. The jab, jab, jab hook is obviously like, keep delivering value until you have something they want. Hormozi's saying give until they ask. And yeah, so I guess the answer is yes. Those two, I think I did a little research. I think you like those guys as well.
Gary Vee and Alex Hormozi are the two main guys that I listen to. And
have you ever met him?
No, I wish.
Yeah.
Gary Vee, hit me up.
I've been writing Hormozi for a little bit. We grew up in the same part of town in Baltimore.
Oh, for real?
Like he went to high school like 2 years, 3 years ahead of me, down the road from me. Like the Smoothie King that he talks about in his videos, I'm pretty sure is the same Smoothie King that I went to.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I feel a lot of camaraderie from afar.
Yeah.
He has no reason. This is the other thing. He has no reason to know who I am.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I like this content thing though, right? Because like maybe you can get in front of him.
Yeah. Well, if you guys were both in Western PA and you graduated from the same high school within a couple years span, there would have been a chance that you're probably related.
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I don't think that family tree extends that far. I don't think so.
That's awesome. But so I hit you with that question about Gary Vee because that's what Gary Vee, his big thing is like attention is the biggest asset.
Especially today. That's his newest thing, right?
Exactly. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I've had this debate with people before now, but like, because obviously time, everyone says time's the greatest asset.
Yep.
But you can have all the time in the world, but if you're not allocating it to whatever, like I could sit in my room for the rest of my life, never do anything with it. So was that time an asset or did it kill me? You know what I mean? So I 100% agree with Gary Vee, especially at this point in time in culture, attention is definitely like the greatest asset. So I think your want and desire for attention is a huge benefit. Good. That's a great thing.
Good. I mean, I guess like it's kind of like how early YouTubers said that they made videos that they wanted to watch. Yeah. And a lot of big creators still say that. They make content that they would like to watch, be that which you would like to see in the world.
Yeah.
And that is easily applied to what Gary says.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So speaking of attention, speaking of you're starting your own podcast.
Yeah.
Probably long overdue based on what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's long overdue.
It's called Thought Leaders.
Thought Leaders.
Tell me about it.
Okay. The goal is very simple, is to meet and learn from the top of the world through the bottom of a glass. Nice. Leaders, which in this case is spelled Liters,
I love it.
Is simply the vehicle through which I gain knowledge. So I tell you what, we're going to film one right here in a little bit, but the idea is that so many people, especially in the business world, via their PR teams, their leadership, their marketing, whatever, they want to be seen as thought leaders, experts in a specific niche, authorities in their industry. And it's been so overused, it's basically a buzzword. I'd like to take a lighthearted look at that lens, still do the learning, but do it in a more laid back environment. And I was in the shower and I was like, God damn it, I just want to figure out how I can sit back and have a fun conversation with somebody. Just try to turn somebody into a thought leader. And I turned both of those words over in my head. Thought didn't get me anywhere tasteful. Leader did.
Yeah.
And I thought, all right, great. So maybe I should just try that. And so I thought of it a year ago. It's so late to the game. I secured the social media handles. Nice. I secured the domain website. I put an email address onto it. And I let it sit for like a year because I was doing stuff for my own business. I was building podcasts for other people, and I hadn't gotten back into the chair myself.
Yeah.
And then a certain point came a couple months ago where I was like, screw it. I'm not ready for it. I'll never be ready for it. So let me just like throw it out.
Yeah.
So the point today is to do that learning through the lighthearted medium and through the vessel and the vehicle of learning, which is the vino or the beer or whatever. And then second to that, I want to use the same content stream to attempt to tell a behind the scenes story of how I'm becoming a B2B content creator.
Gotcha.
Because in 12 to 24 months, that is all that everybody who has a lick of business knowledge is going to want to do.
Yeah.
Similar to how everybody wanted to be a YouTuber 5-10 years ago. I mean, now like more people than ever want to be a creator. LinkedIn and in the business world, it just hasn't reflected yet because it's harder to tie directly to value, which is weird because businesses sell things. They don't rely on AdSense, but it will be huge.
Yeah,
it will be huge.
Specifically about LinkedIn too, I'm sure you've noticed the change where it has like, it's basically the For You kind of section of it with the videos.
Yep.
And
Back in March, I was part of the initial beta for that.
Nice.
And so I saw it from the very first thing. And even today, hopefully it changes, but today you still can't like post directly to it. You have to like write somebody at LinkedIn and you have to say, here is something which I think is either insightful or educational or offers advice. I think it would be valuable to the network. And that's it. And then they hand pick it.
Yeah.
But it is working.
Yeah, exactly.
People's views are going through the roof if they make that feed.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be all anybody wants. I just hope it doesn't get flooded with like the same. There's a danger that, and unfortunately for us in this moment, that the content just looks a lot like this.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to what you might see in a YouTube or a Snap or an Insta, which doesn't always mesh, but it's a Wild West. It's a huge opportunity. Yeah. Remains to be seen what happens.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially LinkedIn. I think the possibilities are huge for businesses because you're in front of people, you're on a platform in front of people that are going there specifically for usually business related reasons.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like they're going on there prepared to see things in that sense. I would say more open to like networking, things like that. Because you go to Instagram or Facebook, probably go there to be entertained or something along those lines, where LinkedIn is more, like we said, the professional. So
yeah, but I think there's an opportunity to mesh the two a little bit. Like there's the classic like boomer argument, like get Facebook off of my LinkedIn page, right? But at the same time, people might dread going to LinkedIn if there weren't a shred of color or creativity or humor.
I agree with that.
And especially not only because of the vertical video feed, which is something that somebody socially native on their phone's already going to be doing. But there's other inventory that LinkedIn is offering now, which bodes well to this sort of medium. Like there's a new ad inventory, which is called Thought Leader Ads. Yeah. So any business, whether PNC, PPG, somewhere downtown, could just go to some LinkedIn user's video and just throw ad dollars against it. And it's Adam, that Adam's video, and underneath just says promoted by PNC, PPG, whatever. It's basically an influencer spot, but it is a way, and initially was, I think, meant to be a way that a company could like take its CEO's profile page and like repost videos. But like, again, so much like natural fit for creators. And like, if you're going to bring creators in, they're not going to be boring.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn knows where their bread is buttered. They're going to take a percentage of every dollar. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I'm surprised that LinkedIn hasn't privatized like influencer agencies yet. And I guess maybe they will. Maybe we're early in that conversation, but yeah.
So to gear my attention real quick to the audience, I'm assuming my audience is younger. So 18 to 35, somewhere in between there. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn.
For sure.
It's very important. I think, especially with younger people, LinkedIn is so overlooked.
Yep.
Very important to get on there. Now I'm going to shift my attention back to Adam.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. Yeah, dude, LinkedIn, super important. I made my only profile when I was in the middle of college. Took like two years. But then my first internship was at LinkedIn. Because I leaned leaned super hard into like making some stuff there. And then I applied. I think I applied through campus recruiting. But the point is that, I saw it about as early as I could. But yeah, which was about 10 years into 2012 was when I created the profile. 2013 was my internship. So they were 10 years old at that point.
When you do, so say you have a client, you do a podcast for him. The goal is B2B connections.
Yep.
Are you only posting on LinkedIn, or are you also on like all the other platforms, or are there other like certain like, are you on Facebook, Instagram for them?
Everywhere that can fit. And like, this is not the best advice if I'm going to be the consummate creator, cross platform, But yeah, if I'm going to cut a clip out of a pod, I'm going to cut it in vertical. I'm going to throw it to shorts. I'm going to throw it to reels, Facebook and Insta.
Exactly.
I'm going to throw it to LinkedIn, of course. I'm going to leave it as like compressed assets that the sales team of my client can use in emails so that it's just sent one-to-one, use it in SMS, use it on their website, their blog. So yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is the only true website where I can look back one-to-one to see who engaged on something because it's their name.
Yeah.
So if they comment, if they share it, if they like it, I can see it. I don't see that on Facebook. I don't see that, or I do, but it's like obfuscated by a username.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Which doesn't have to be like, it could be a fake person. So LinkedIn's the primary, but again, that's just because that's where most business people live. So like that's kind of the goal. But then thinking broader than that, most B2B content sucks. Truly is the same, like talking heads Zoom side by side, heads not at the same level.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's
like
the insert industry talks podcast.
Yes.
And it's like, let's just learn. It's like, nobody gives a shit about that.
Yeah.
Right. If you had a crumb of creativity, you could easily turn that into like a widescreen thing for YouTube. Yeah. It might not get like 1 million, 2 million views, but like, it's just, there's so much more opportunity in those places, especially for somebody. I mean, B2B, sure, but let's say you're like a services business. Like that's the kind of place where you can do a ton of damage, like in a good way.
No, for sure.
But yeah, LinkedIn is where it all is. I think like the podcast medium as well, audio only, but I work mostly in video now.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Make the content that you're creating for your client different to stand out from the competition.
I think it's like a thoughtful ignorance. I come into an industry or I come into a company and this is why agencies are great for businesses anyway, but like I come in with a fresh perspective. I come in and I say, hey, I looked around at your 10 competitors. Like I did this, I'll sanitize this example, but in working with an insurance company, I looked at their 8 to 10 closest competitors and all of the podcasts, only 2 of them were video and the rest were literally almost the exact same thing, like the insurance show or the company name show. And the whole point was learn from industry professionals about the topics that matter. And literally they all said that. So I'll open up the onion a little bit here. The segment that I went in with, the concept that I went in with was I said, okay, everybody does this. And so there's good news and bad news. The good news is like people are used to podcasts existing here, which is great. It means we're likely to get guests no matter what. We're a big brand name in this insurance world. The bad news is that like everything we're going to do is going to feel like new to a guest. The concept specifically that I came up with was, okay, instead of just having the whatever insurance podcast, let's have like this like dimly lit room with like warm lamps over the top of the host and the guest. And in front of them is put like an industry problem. And it's like stats and there's a counter in front of them. Stats and risks and money and perspectives, and like we are presenting a problem about the industry. How are the host and guest like thinking about this problem? It's basically still talking about problems, and the concept is called counterclaim because the claim comes in like an insurance company, and then they adjust on the claim, and then they deliver their like response to the claim, which is like an insurance what they do. Most insurance executives began as claims adjusters, and so this show, which I hope it's called this, but it's called Counterclaim, is where 2 people on the same side of the desk, which is also a metaphor for like you want insurance to be on your side, looks at this claim about the world and makes the claim. It's a very neat, like 12 to 20 minute spot. It can be infinitely segmented and immediately more interesting because like all I did was invoke a little bit of juice, a little bit of creativity. And it doesn't even have to rise to the level of Hot Ones. All I have to do is like the bar's on the floor, man. Like in most B2B context, the bar is on the floor.
It's very true.
So that's how I do. I come in with a little bit of thoughtful ignorance and say, what if we just did this?
Yeah.
And then I just run with it. I just let people like smile and nod and I'll just run with it. And by the time we're matured enough, people typically say yes because it's more interesting than anything else that they've pitched or been pitched.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not as safe.
Yeah.
And then it typically works out because then on the other side, guests will say, oh, that's cool. Like I could be on 8 podcasts that are basically the same thing, or I could be on that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's filmed. They're going to come to me. It's going to make me look good. It's a concept which is just like interesting.
Yeah.
That's literally all you need in B2B. Like it is so damn easy. I'm surprised more people haven't gone into that like creative studio mindset or that flagship content sort of world, because if you can tie value to it, there's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. So it's like you can't change. So B2B, we'll talk about specifically insurance, like you were talking about. At the end of the day, the nitty gritty of insurance, it's kind of boring. Like the
Totally
information
boring.
doesn't change, but what you're doing is you're giving it like new packaging.
Yep.
And that in turn is creating new attention because it looks
Yep.
better than the other stuff.
Let me give you another example, and I'll keep this one quicker. But another world which I think is pretty boring, but I can say it because I came out of it. I took 2 years before or 4 years before I worked for that startup. I did tech sales. It was in analytics. Analytics is boring as shit. There is nothing that could convince me that analytics is wow wonderful, unless I were like a head of FP&A or something and it was my job. So I had pitched a company, actually the company I used to work for, which was all about like retail experimentation analytics. They wanted to test something in a Walmart. They could see whether it moved the needle, made money. They could roll that idea out, right? And it's just basically applying the scientific method to business. And within that world, all of the podcasts are pretty much just the same. Let's learn about analytics today. How is AI going to help? You know, all this like white paper bullshit. And so I had this idea where it was like, okay, instead, let's say we work with a consumer packaged goods business in a retail environment, and we set it in a store in front of an aisle of goods. And the conversation can stay the same. Like, how are you innovating in the way that you're testing things out? And the show concept, that show concept was called Aisle on Trial. And the host literally dressed up like in a powdered wig and a judge gown. And then the people from the brand came in on with a branded collared shirt, and they just had to make their case as to how they were truly innovating. And then the judge or the host like makes a verdict at the end. The aisle is put on trial, and the trial is a double meaning because, of course, the company I was working with was involved in retail experimentation. So it's like again, not something. I'm not talking about like sports in an analytics environment. I'm talking about the same stuff. I'm just putting a fancier shell on it.
Yeah.
Again, literally all you need to do, but it takes time. It's difficult. The creative minds that would otherwise do that, who work full time for these businesses, are so dragged down with the mundane day to day, all the stuff they got to do, the reports they got to churn, the attribution they have to, and so it never gets done because it's just not seen as nice to have. But then eventually we'll get to a point where like the people they want to reach are only going to be contacted and only hooked via those creative methods.
Yeah.
Probably like several years out on that, but it's coming.
All right. So Adam, like I said before, my audience is a lot of younger people. So what advice would you give to someone? Maybe they don't know exactly what they want to do yet, but they're thinking they have to reinvent the wheel. But you're proving to us you don't really have to reinvent it, but you can repackage it. What kind of advice would you give to someone for that?
So I'll riff off of that for a second. In none of my content do I reinvent any wheel. I work with a client. They're a super deep tech solution for blah, 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 whatever. I'm never going to know anything about that. All I know how to do is to package something creatively. Likewise, if I'm 18 or if I'm just out of college, I don't know anything about the world. I certainly didn't when I was that age. And so if I don't know that much about the world, the next best thing that I can do is to figure out how to condense, solidify, repackage, and then present that information, if content is my world, in a creative way that other people like me will understand. So, for instance, like if I were really into sports, and this is a broad niche, but like I would just spend as much time as possible trying to figure out how to like condense and repackage a really deep sports story in a way which is appealing and maybe shorter for attention spans and whatever, and build a body of work. So the first piece of advice, again, if you're inclined in this sort of way to storytell, is to figure out how to repackage. Startups do this all the time. The Airbnb. Oh, we're hotels for conference goers, which is what it started out, right? The blank for blank is a great way to think about anything, content, start a business, whatever. So figuring out how to repackage something in a cooler way is a thumbs up. And then secondly, because you're young and your risk profile is relatively high, I would just start by developing a body of work in whatever you want to do. If you want to be in content or writing or whatever, you just start by creating as much as possible. And it's not all going to be bangers. Probably maybe 5% of it will be great.
Exactly.
But you prove to the world that you are trying and you're putting stuff out there and you're being consistent. And by the way, if we're talking about then getting into business, getting a job, whatever, it doesn't even necessarily matter if the body of work that you have is relevant to the line of work that you want to get into. You're just proving to somebody that you can be committed to something.
Yeah.
And so I did customer success for that startup. It was an ad tech startup. I had a huge body of work in podcasts. There was nothing aligned there. I was building niche Instagram pages for like my hometown, like nothing about that, except the ability to like garner attention, build relationships. All of that was a very translatable skill.
Yeah.
So 2 advices, folks. Learning how to repackage things creatively and digestibly is a superpower, and then building a body of work in whatever you do to prove your longevity, consistency, and dedication are 2 very strong, very translatable skills and strengths.
Yeah. I was going to say too, even something that you said towards the end there, I feel like in a sense you were saying like the fundamentals too of this, of repackaging and creativity and things like that while you're young and you don't know what you're doing yet.
Right.
Just get the fundamentals down, because as you go on in your journey, those fundamentals like stand true.
Totally.
That's why they're called the fundamentals.
Totally. I mean, literally nobody is going to believe that you're an expert in anything at the age of 18.
Exactly.
And so if that's the case, you might as well lean into it.
Yeah.
And do what you can do, which is you can come up with a great idea, you can be creative, and that's where you'll win first.
There's one more thing too I want to segue into based on this conversation, talking about being young, lack of experience, mentorship. How has that impacted you? And if you were mentored, what did that relationship look like?
I'll talk about 2 mentors. They're both my bosses. So I had 2 jobs before I did the startup, or before I did my own startup. One at that startup and one at the tech sales business. These were both folks who had built huge businesses beforehand. The first of whom came in as like the first salesperson for this organization and took it from like a small business in early 2000s all the way to a $600 million exit. The other one was the startup founder. She had previously built like the first startup that put ads into video games and sold it to Microsoft
awesome.
For a huge amount of dough. I know.
That's
right?
awesome.
So I'm like,
that's really cool.
It's
Yeah.
super cool. So I'm like 26. I got stars in my eyes. I'm thinking, how in the world can I learn from her? But I'll talk about her second. The first one, John, did a couple things for me. Number one, my first year in my first job, I sucked. And I was nearly fired twice. I got pipped, which in the world of sales is basically like, we're going to give you 6 weeks to find a job and then you're going to get the hell out of here. Unless you can pass these like crazy tests, which I did twice. And
Nice.
every day for 4 years at 1:30 in the afternoon, John and I would talk for a half hour. He was the head of this global sales team. He devoted a hell of a lot of time to me. And that mentorship taught me a couple of things. Number one, always give somebody benefit of the doubt. Number two, never give up on somebody. Number three, like dedication over time, like it breeds this compounding interest. And I went from somebody who was like almost a stereotypical screw up at a sales company to becoming like the top performer in my cohort within like a year or two because of that trust and love to an extent, for what it's worth. I still talk with John to this day. He's the person who convinced me to truly jump into this business now. He is the one who's convinced me to do a little bit of pivoting, do with the thought leaders thing today.
Shout out to you, John.
Shout out to you, John. John will watch this, by the way. He'll love it too.
Love you, John.
See, he didn't even know you yet. Catherine came. Catherine is like the second mentor, executor extraordinaire, knows how to take a strategy and execute it. And has had a couple of visionary ideas along the way. And from her, I learned how to take whatever effort I had in my head and like execute it on paper to, 5 to 10 times its potential output. And so the podcast, for instance, I said, hey, we can get some people to like maybe listen to our product offering if I can get them on the podcast first. And she said, great. And this is actually towards the close of the business. She goes, okay, great. I got a challenge for you. In the next 30 days, you need to record 30 podcasts with CMOs and founders. And I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? And so basically we sat down and we talked about how to like block and tackle the tasks. And she wasn't a podcast person, but she's an executor extraordinaire.
Fundamentals, baby.
Fundamentals, baby. She taught me how to execute like nobody's business. And John taught me how to just stay focused, stay addicted to the mission and make it happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love that you said she taught you how to take it in like block size pieces. And that's something where I can attest to, where I'm a big visionary, big dreamer.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm like, I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
So it's very important to take things in like block size pieces and like map out the journey to the goal, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to just like think about it and then you're there.
Right.
So it's very important to take it in bite-sized chunks, but
know.
treat every bite-sized chunk as though it is that like the end goal. You know what I mean? Put as much effort into that little thing that seems so minute.
Right.
Because in the end, it's going to get you to where you want to go.
Yep. Yeah. To work backwards from that future state, which is another thing Catherine always taught me, as is super important, because it's easy to look at that future state and fantasize it, and then nothing materializes in the middle, and you're just always thinking about it. Right. That's the trope of the wantrepreneur.
Yeah.
But that never works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So one more question on mentorship, and then we're going to wrap it up. So for someone who doesn't really know what a mentor or mentorship looks like, your relationship with them, was it something where you're like, hey, can you be my mentor? Or was it something that just organically happened and then you reflect back and you say, okay, this is someone that I learned a lot from?
With the first, it organically happened because there was, at that business, there was an advisor-advisee relationship, and we were just paired together. And so actually I was paired with somebody else, and then we became paired together because I was like screwing up. So it was like a remedial like medicine. And the second one, I worked for her. So again, sort of natural, but I never approached it like, hey, can you be my mentor? Because like, even though that probably could work at the age of like 16, 17, 18, 19, once you're in the professional world, even as 22, 23-year-old, like you're sort of expected to like learn and get advice from people, but like do it in a more specific, targeted way. So if I were 32 years old like I am today and I were looking for a mentor, I would probably start by asking them some very specific piece of advice. Honestly, I'd probably ask them to be on a podcast or something like that, so I can at least give them some value, again, going all the way back to feeling I need to deserve to be in the room with something, and then taking that nugget of advice that they give me and then mastering the art of asking tangential questions, ancillary questions, until I can expand that conversation and relationship to the point where I can be asking the larger lifelong questions that you traditionally associate mentorship with, that, you know, guides you down your path in life. But especially if your mentors are super like aspirational in your head, like Gary V, Hormozy, like it's a dime a dozen. You're never going to get them.
Exactly.
So can you just be my mentor? No.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Could you get their advice on a very specific thing, go and act on it, come back, give them an update, and slowly snowball a relationship that way? Maybe. The answer, I don't know if it's yes or no, but like you certainly give yourself a lot better chance than by simply saying, can you do this for me? Because that's really what it is. It's an ask. It's a pulling of resource rather than an attempt at a value exchange.
Yeah. No, that's great insight on that, because a lot of people listening to this probably never had that type of relationship before. So thanks for kind of breaking down what that looked like for you. And now the last question I have for you is a question that I ask everyone on the podcast. I always put them on the spot with this question because I have, as of the recording of this, I haven't released any episodes yet. So no one knows I asked this, but I'm excited for you to answer it. It's not as crazy as you think it's about to be.
It can be as crazy as you want, brother.
I kind of build it up as it's something crazy. But so someone watched this entire podcast right now, and we're at the end now.
Yep.
If there's only one thing that someone was going to take out of it to get 1% better today, what would that advice be to them from you?
Okay, good. Somebody listens to this body of work, and they say, I'm going to take one little action based on what he said. So they're unlikely to start a podcast. They're unlikely to deep dive into some flagship video content series. It's probably something mentor related. It's definitely something aspirational related. I think that what I would hope somebody does is to make a list, physically or mentally, of the people that you would like to learn from. Pick one, and then just research them as much as you can and play 20 questions with yourself. Write out, what would I ask this person if I had 5 minutes with them? Tranche it by importance, and then maybe take the top 2 or 3 of those questions with a mix of strategic and tactical, and then go make that outreach. Similar to building a business, I think finding a mentor can very much be an idea of visualizing yourself on the beach. I'm getting taught by this great person, and I'm soaking in knowledge, and I'm like turning it into money. But it's very difficult to get to unless you can prove that you're going to do it, or at least unless you prove that you've done your research and had put thought into it. So if there's one thing I'd like somebody that watches this to do, especially if they're young, starting their career, whatever, is to come up with like the most thoughtful question possible for your mentor. The top 2 or 3 most thoughtful questions you could come up with for a prospective mentor, and then just shoot your shot.
I love that.
And just say, worst case, what you've done is you've gone through the mental exercise of like how to ask questions to people who you aspire to be. And that's half the battle.
Yeah. I think that's awesome advice. That's the first time, even just to wrap it all up.
Yeah.
That was even a creative answer, because I feel like everyone's given like a different answer.
Yep.
But like, I just really like that answer that you just gave right there.
Because I've asked these questions. I've asked like advice questions on pods that I've done too.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the answer that I'll get is some variation of, you just got to do it. Just do it, right? That first entrepreneurial podcast that I did, I said like, you know, what's your advice to somebody else who's thinking about starting their own thing? Just start. Just do it, man. And like, I get it. Just do it. Sure, obviously. But it needs to be way smaller than that.
Yeah.
You can write 5 questions on the back of a napkin. Easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam. Before we wrap it up, tell everyone how they can find you.
On socials at Adam on Brand. You can also eventually find Thought Leaders at Thought Leaders pretty much everywhere. There's a little bit of content there today, but it will eventually be a flagship content series for all things me. And other than that, that's it. That's pretty much it.
You'll be able to find me on the Thought Leaders podcast, because we're about to film that right now.
Right now.
So hop on over there. I would assume, I don't know, maybe
YouTube
it might be
related card. You know, it's here.
Exactly.
Your face is here. Subscribe button.
Everywhere.
Yeah, this is just the last 25 seconds of the show. It's just like it's just running out of time.
Yeah.
You better click, otherwise the video is going to end. You're going to get some ad, and you hate that, right? Come on, go over there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Adam. Appreciate you being on. Thank you for your time today. But to hop on the Thought Leaders, thank you guys for watching the Yen podcast, episode 7. If you're not subscribing already, subscribe. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. Thank you guys. See you in the next one.